In Raven 2, there are many stats and special effects that influence how we deal damage and how effective our character becomes overall. Many players recognize these terms but don't always understand what they actually do or when they matter most. That's why in this video, I'll explain in simple words how each effect works. Bash, double bash, bash damage, fatality, critical, double critical, weapon attack amplification, basic attack damage amplification, damage reduction, and max barrier. With this knowledge, it will be much easier to understand when these stats are crucial and when their importance becomes secondary. Let's begin with Bash. Bash is an additional effect that can activate when performing a basic attack and deal extra damage. It functions as a separate hit, independent from critical strikes. In practice, it simply gives you more attacks during combat. If your character relies heavily on auto attacks, Bash becomes a very important source of extra damage. However, if you play a character whose main damage comes from skills, then Bash becomes much less significant. Double Bash is an enhanced version of Bash. It may provide 2 chances to trigger the effect or allow 2 additional hits instead of 1. For characters who focus on attack speed and frequent procs, Double Bash can greatly increase overall DPS. Bash damage represents the amount of damage dealt specifically by the Bash effect. If your build is centered around Bash, this stat becomes essential because every proc hits harder. But if Bash is only a small addition to your build, this stat can be considered less important. Fatality is an execution effect. It usually works by increasing damage when the enemy has low health. It acts as a finisher that helps end fights or boss battles more quickly. This mechanic is especially useful in burst belts, where the final hit can make a huge difference. Critical or critical strike is a staple of almost every RPG. A critical hit increases the damage of a single attack using a special multiplier. Critical performance has 2 components: the chance to land a critical hit and the strength of the critical hit, meaning how much more damage it deals. Builds focused on burst damage like assassins or characters designed for powerful single strikes benefit the most from high critical stats. Double critical is an enhanced form of critical performance. It may act as an extra multiplier or provide a second chance for a critical strike to occur. In practice, it makes critical hits even more destructive and increases their impact on overall DPS. This stat is extremely valuable in builds centered around massive burst damage. Weapon attack is the base value from which most of your character's damage is calculated. The higher your weapon attack, the stronger your basic hits and many of your skills become. It is one of the most fundamental stats that directly increases your character's power. Weapon attack amplification boosts your weapon attack by a percentage. It doesn't add a flat value. It strengthens what you already have. Even a small increase in this stat can noticeably boost your damage, especially with strong weapons or high base stats. Basic attack damage amplification increases the damage of your normal attacks. If your character's main source of damage is auto attacks, this stat becomes extremely important. In builds focused on skill damage, its impact is much smaller. Damage reduction reduces the damage you receive from enemies. It is essential for tank characters or anyone who wants to survive longer in battle. This stat is especially valuable in PvP, where surviving burst damage often determines the outcome of a fight. Max barrier defines the maximum value of your protective shield, which absorbs damage before it affects your HP. Increasing your barrier helps you endure heavy hits and gives you better control of the battle. It's useful in both PvE and PvP, especially when facing opponents capable of strong burst attacks. In summary, every one of these stats influences your character in a different way, and none of them exist by accident. Understanding how bash, critical hits, weapon attack, damage reduction, or barrier work in practice allows you to optimize your build exactly for your playstyle, depending on whether you rely on auto attacks, burst damage, skills, or tanking. Different stats will become essential while others will remain secondary. With this knowledge, you'll be able to choose the best gear, upgrades, and effects to make your character in Raven 2 as effective as possible. To complete the picture, let's briefly look at which stats are the most important for each type of class in the game. Characters who rely heavily on basic attacks, such as fast melee fighters or ranged auto attack classes, benefit the most from bash, double bash, bash damage, weapon attack, and basic attack damage amplification. Their strength comes from consistent hits, so anything that increases the frequency or power of their auto attacks becomes essential. Burst-oriented classes like assassins or high-damage melee fighters focus primarily on critical, double critical, weapon attack amplification, and fatality. These characters aim to eliminate enemies quickly with powerful single blows, so boosting critical damage and strengthening the finishing power of their hits is the main priority. Classes that rely on skill-based damage, such as mages or ability-focused fighters, care less about bash and more about general attack strength, critical scaling on skills, and amplification stats that strengthen their abilities. For them, consistency comes from skill rotation rather than basic attacks. Finally, tank-type characters and defensive builds prioritize damage reduction, max barrier, and any source of survivability that helps them withstand long fights both in PvE and PvP. Their role is to absorb damage and stay alive as long as possible, so defensive stats will always be the foundation of their build. If you enjoyed this explanation and want more guides like this, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. It really helps and motivates me to create even more content for you.